Welcome to the Navigating Solo podcast, the show dedicated to providing solo agers and allied professionals with valuable insights, practical advice, and supportive resources. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and today I am excited to welcome our guest, Joy Loverde. Joy has a reputation for being a path carver and a visionary. She played a key role in introducing eldercare as an employee benefit to corporate America. Joy is a mature market consultant and keynote speaker, and is the best selling author of two fantastic books: The Complete Elder Planner, now in its fourth edition, and Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? Another fantastic resource. She is often quoted in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, among many publications. USA Today ran a four-part series on Joy's caregiver programs. Joy's national media credits include The Today Show, Good Morning America, the CBS Early Show, and National Public Radio. Critics hail her work as illuminating, eye opening, and required reading for everyone over 40. For more information about Joy and her work, you can visit her website, elderindustry.com. And if you didn't catch that, to quickly write it down, we'll mention it again at the end of the episode, and it will also be listed as part of the details of the show notes. And with that, Joy, thank you so much for joining us today.
I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here.
Fantastic. We have exciting things to discuss. So I thought we could dive right in. Can you share your personal path to taking a deep dive into solo aging and caregiving, and what actually motivated you to look at these important aspects of aging?
Well, my journey in caregiving began over 40 years ago. I was a freshman in high school and I went to a nursing home and I noticed that 7 people were sitting in the dark on Thanksgiving morning. And that opened my eyes as a teenager. And I never forgot what I was looking at. So when I turned around the age of 40, I decided, how did these people end up there and what could I possibly do about it? And what I ended up doing is writing the first edition of the Complete Elder Care Planner solely to get people to start talking to each other within the family. So I was on the road since 1980, talking to mostly corporate America employees who were working and trying to juggle work and family and elder care. And about 10 years ago, I realized, because people were coming up to me saying, I don't know who's going to do this for me, meaning I don't know who's going to take care of me. And that's when the second book was born. So now I've come full circle.
And there's a blend, and you are the perfect person to talk about both of these topics individually and certainly that intersection. And I know that listeners will gain so much from our conversation. For solo agers, planning for future caregiving needs can be a significant concern, as it can be for anyone as they think about aging. But for solo agers, especially because of the lack of traditional family support. So, what makes planning for the future different and more challenging for someone who identifies as a solo ager?
Agers, especially, will need to get used to the idea of a revolving door of relationships. So that means that, and this is true for all of us, Aileen, we're initially surrounded by people we know, right? I mean, we our neighbors and our friends and some family, maybe siblings and so on. But the longer we live, the more we are left behind.
Mm.
And so as we grow older and as we become older in our needs, perhaps, we're going to all eventually land up in the hands of professionals,
Mm.
because that's the way to plan. People like yourself, people need to know about the value of hiring patient advocates, senior living communities, active adult communities. aging life plan managers, anyone who is in a business to take care of the needs of people who identify as solo agers. And then the planning for that really is someone who may not be a solo ager right now. We need to plan as though we are a solo ager.
Mhm.
Just makes sense, right? So aligning now to people in businesses is a solid plan, getting to know what they do and what they provide.
That's great. I think that having a sense of what's available to people and how to build that team is critical. And some of the professions you cited may be new to people hearing them for the first time or thinking about them in that capacity. So I know that in and of itself is a great piece of advice.
Think about it, it's the businesses. People don't realize that people are in the business of helping all of us age well.
Right.
And so having knowledge of those companies is so important because then we could go to them now and we could say, now look, I'm planning, but it's kind of early yet.
Hmm.
But how do I know you're going to be there for me when I need you? These are the kinds of questions we need to ask the professionals now.
Right.
So that's key. Identifying them is one thing.
Hmm.
Asking them, okay, if we cut a deal now and I get to know you now, how does this go through my life cycle? Help me with this. And then that's how we create a system of support around us.
Right, I joke, right? Succession is not just a great television show on a cable network, right? The notion of what is the succession plan? If you get to know me and I get to know you, and through just life, you've changed your availability. What's the plan, right?
Yeah.
Who am I going to be able to engage with? If not you, then who or whom? And but doing that proactive planning, our dream in the work that we do is that we're working with people who are thinking proactively. We know as humans, it's kind of hard to do that sometimes. And that as humans, we often respond to things reactively. As a healthcare, I often hear from people who are in the midst of navigating a crisis because they are trying to figure out what are the tools available to them now. They've used their skills, but more than that, they're emotionally spent, they're drained. And so the notion of professionals who are outside of that emotional experience, professionals who care about their clients, of course, but aren't in that emotional friend dynamic or family dynamic, can really aid in helping with planning and affecting better outcomes. We can't change the medical pieces, but we can change the planning pieces.
Well, and there's the trust factor.
Mhm.
So if I'm in a crisis and I contact a professional, let's say an elder law attorney, do I know this person? Have I had time to establish a relationship? No. No, so the trust happens over time. That's why when we plan for the future, getting to know the professionals now, even though we may not ever need them, we have them in our back pocket. Isn't the idea of planning really for peace of mind? And that's what it
Absolutely.
brings to the table.
That peace of mind and that ability to go live a thriving life filled with lifelong learning and other things, because you know that the hard stuff, which always needs tweaking and revisiting, it's always dynamic, but the hard stuff, the initial hard conversations, all of that is in place to be able to leave you with the opportunity to do the other things that we'd much rather do on a gorgeous summer day as we're talking today. One of the things you and I have talked about outside of a podcast recording relates to solo agers thinking about caregiving and thinking about it, one, from the perspective of why should a solo ager be concerned about caregiving if there aren't other immediate family members? If we're talking about a segment of a demographic who are without the reliable support of adult children or adult family members, then why is caregiving something that solo agers need to think about? Are they just thinking about it from the care they're receiving and all of those people, possibly professionals, and then others in their support system, which you and I have just previously talked about? Or is there more to it?
Caregiving. So it's not something that comes up in most solo agers conversation. They are typically focused on who's going to take care of me. Okay. I got to get that figured out. And that is true.
Hmm.
But to focus on that one side of the coin is not realistic. And here's why. Now, we all have people in our life we love and care about. So I want everybody who's watching this to ask themselves, who do you think your friends and local neighbors and people who like you are going to look to on the day they might need help? Who do you think they're going to call? If you are close, if you are best of friends, there's a really good chance that you're going to be on the other end of that 2 o'clock in the morning phone call. Solo agers don't tend to think about that.
Right.
They are focused on who will take care of me. And what I am imploring solo agers to do is to start think about the question, who might land on my doorstep? Who might look to me for care? And one good way to start with that is look at the contacts on your phone. These are the people that we're close to. We need to think about taking care of each other. And the most important reason why is we're in the middle of a care worker shortage
Mm,
and it's not getting any better. So I know that it's a flip in terms of a solo ager's typical planning,
mhm.
but think about the day that somebody's going to look to you for care. And then you say, wow, I didn't expect this. We need to expect it, especially if we have people in our lives who we're not related to, our friends, our neighbors, and they might come and say, I need help.
I think I can speak from personal experience just professionally in having conversations about it, certainly benefiting from the fourth edition of the Complete Elder Care Planner and the conversations we've had around it, that it's a real light bulb moment when we're talking about preparing, helping solo agers plan and prepare. How are you going to fill in the different aspects of your planning needs in a one directional way? People volunteer to help other people because that's a good human thing to do. It also demonstrates you might need help. But the notion, and as you said, flipping that around and really being able to say, okay, you've thought about who your 3 a.m. person might be. Have you ever considered you're on the short list of someone else's 3 a.m. list? Oh, so I think that's a really great thing to bring up and to really help people see in a very different way than they might be prepared or naturally think about. When we think about caregiving along those lines, are there specific challenges related to caregiving that those who identify as solo agers face, and how can they best plan for some of those?
Well, first of all, I shudder to think of how a solo ager might find out their friend who may be looking upon them to help them in a situation may not have any money.
Mm,
Now, what does that mean in terms of the solo ager being a caregiver?
mm,
Are they supposed to dip into their own pockets?
right.
Hopefully not. But we find out the hard way that money is a factor. So one of the things I suggest is if you have a plan, if you have a financial planner, if you have someone who helps you with a budget, why not make an appointment and bring your friend along? First of all, have the conversation. Look, Jane, you and I aren't getting any younger, and I want to be there for you as best I can. What do you say we figure out how much we can afford in terms of taking care of each other and what you can afford and what I can afford? So, this is one thing money, Aileen, number one.
Mm,
Number two is the idea about creating legal documents between two people that are not related. And
mhm.
if we don't do that, we don't have any decision making powers. So, this is really important. Also, just again, going to an elder law attorney or a financial planner together you could just go there and ask questions, right? You don't need to formulate a plan, but you do have to find out, what does it mean if I take my friend to the hospital? What about signing the HIPAA
Mm,
thing? I mean, it's just so much to think about. But
right.
I want to say one thing, and this is something that solo agers really need to think about, and that is, you don't have to say yes to taking care of caregiving for somebody else. You have the right to say no. And I have plenty of people that I know who do not intend to be a caregiver for their friend. They say they can't handle it. They don't want to handle it. But here's the thing, it requires a conversation.
Mhm.
If you have a best friend and you say, I love you to pieces, but I'm not the person you can count on if something happens. We need to talk about it because I'm sorry, but it's just not going to be me.
I was giving a talk once, and someone we were talking about characteristics for a healthcare proxy. The notion of not everyone was born to be someone's healthcare proxy. Not everyone was born to be a hands-on caregiver. The concept of yes, the concept of no is a complete sentence. All of those pieces. And one of the attendees said, until I had attended community education on these types of subjects, it never occurred to me to really hear my friend who says, I really cannot stand walking into a hospital. I can't take it. I can't take walking into a X kind of rehab or whatever. And that individual said, "It occurred to me they would not be a good candidate to be my X, Y, or Z, my healthcare proxy, my bedside advocate, whatever it is." But it took that flipping of the conversation of thinking about it. A struggle for solo agers often is, who do I designate? Who do I include in my support system? Who's a part of my inner circle, my circle of trust? Whatever you wanna call it, and because of the intentionality of trying to make sure those pieces are in place, sometimes the who would be the best, who's willing to do that, and who am I willing to do that for if it were so it's as instructive to put together my own plan as it is to see what someone might ask of me. And to be able to flip that, I think, is so useful and really important. And I think you're right. I think it's often left out of the long list of concerns and worries and really should be equally front and center.
And with the care worker shortage right front and center, we are going to be taking care of each other. No, none of us is going to age in a void. Solo agers cannot walk around the world saying, who's going to take care of me? They have to say, and who is going to look to me for care?
Right. It has to be a
Because it's a
compound question.
true,
Right.
yeah. And then you'll get some real answers.
So having those conversations can be difficult. People often,
Oh,
well, one,
yeah.
we know that people steer away from things and don't think they have the answer to begin with. And two, those conversations are hard. You could
Yes.
talk about where you'd rather go to lunch or grab a cup of coffee or meet up for a glass of wine or whatever, or something you watched on television or something you read. But the notion of talking about caregiving and being part of a support system, that's hard stuff. On the list of things we're going to choose to do on a sunny day, that may not be at the top of it.
It's got to be the adult in the room. That's
Right.
all I have to say. Decide which is worse, saying nothing or saying something and being the adult and getting it out. Get it out in the
Exactly.
air it out.
If someone were thinking about, "Oh my goodness, this is a really great point. I have no idea where to start," other than the implicit, obviously, start with your 2 books and other great resources available to them that way, and taking opportunities to listen to conversations like this and other workshops. What would be some advice on where someone might start to think about that? Is it making their own list? Is it using a worksheet in one of your books? What would you suggest?
So there's a couple of things that we all share in common. So I like to do the common denominator. Number one, it's going to cost money to be old. So number one, is figuring out the finances of living a longer life and figuring them out with someone else so that you get the money card on the table right away.
Mhm.
Talk to insurance people, talk to long term care insurance people, find out about money. Definitely make an appointment to be with a financial planner who could help both of you right now. But the second thing is, which is another common denominator, is we all have to live somewhere,
Mhm.
right? Where we live is going to play a huge role in how well we go through the rest of our lives
Mhm.
and how much we have in terms of a support system. So, money and housing. And there is a third one, and I always like to throw it out here because I always want to say there's no guarantee that you are going to get sick. So stay healthy. What are your friends doing? What are you all doing to try to stay as healthy as possible? Because if you want to live the lifestyle of aging in place that everybody wants, then you have to be healthy. So do the money thing, do the housing thing, you're good to go. Keep it simple.
Right.
Simple.
Keep it simple. One thing about having the resources to meet with a financial planner or thinking one does not, the awareness that there are community professionals who partner with community organizations and will do pro bono meets at
That's
a
right.
senior center at a et cetera.
Yes. I have so many resources in both of my books, and each chapter has an end called low cost and no cost resources. None of getting advice needs to cost a dime.
That's an excellent point. I think that having those resources are critical because those barriers, even just in our heads, in
Yeah.
terms of, wait a minute, she's giving this advice. Okay, so caregiving for a friend, but they may not have the means to pay for a caregiver. And also legally, what are the implications of and all of that's going to take some financial resources to figure that out. Okay, but we've talked about that being limited. So knowing there are answers to that, resources to go pursue,
Yep.
I think is really helpful. I know that it's ideal, of course, to have your books and other great books like these on bookcases, but they're also available in libraries as well, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So that,
Online with the audio, the whole night. Yeah.
okay.
Any way you want a book.
So that also expands accessibility. We like to make
Yes.
sure that folks ideally have something they're able to take right in, et cetera, take notes in. But if they don't have that, I like to remind people that great books like yours are also available in other ways and to pursue that if that's a challenge for someone or a preference. In general, we're talking about proactive, ideally, and even delving into the reactive. But
Yeah.
often folks are having these conversations or thinking about them in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. But sometimes those in their 40s, 50s, etc., will, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I often get asked, "Am I too young to be thinking about this?" And I say,
No.
I depending on what warped sense of humor I choose to use in the moment, it's the time we're 18 and legally an adult, we should be thinking about this. We don't usually gravitate towards doing that in our late teens, early 20s. But for someone who might fall into the 40s, 50s, younger adult category that way in terms of the demographics, and they want to plan ahead but haven't really thought about the topic of solo aging, what would you suggest beyond the fabulous things you've suggested to be able to plan ahead for that secure peace of mind that we've talked about?
Well, we did talk about making sure we have money in the bank,
Mm,
and we did talk about where we live, but I could dive into where we live a little more.
sure.
And that would be these articles that are popping up all over the place about longevity friendly cities. And what the heck does that mean? So the scientists know that we're going to live a very long time if we're lucky enough. But the cities are not yet conforming to that possibility. So if I were a much younger person in my 30s and 40s, I would begin to look for areas to live in that are more like smaller villages
Mhm.
where we could grow and be surrounded by villagers who live with us and work with us every step of the way. And then if we do want to relocate, we could find other villages that are longevity friendly.
Mm.
And by longevity friendly, there that's a big picture right there. So, can I work if I'm 80, 90, and 100 years old? Are there opportunities for me to have a whole life engagement? Look into the long future about where you're living in terms of providing a quality of life for people of every age, not old people, but everybody. A lot of intergenerational activities, a lot of opportunity to contribute to that city. These are easy to find if you just Google them: longevity friendly city, age friendly city. This is what I would be doing as a younger person, looking for opportunity to where I can work for the rest of my life, where I can be surrounded by people that we support each other as we grow older.
That's excellent advice. Hopefully, people will shift to thinking about that more and being able to benefit from the research that's out there now and the topics that are being floated and explored.
Aileen, I think it's also an opportunity for these younger people, 30s and 40s, to create them. Is like if they can't find what they're looking for or they think they've found an ideal location, things stopping anyone from creating a smaller version of what they feel is ideal.
Ah, there's that proactive taking initiative,
Yeah,
you'll need and life at other people, and you
yeah.
can learn from and with others that way, which is a fabulous part of life. For you, you have been navigating the waters of caregiving. You spoke of an early life experience, eye opening experience when it comes to caregiving, and then also the eye opening pieces related to solo aging and who might take care of me when I'm old and all of those tough questions. But you've seen both of these topics shift over time and certainly been a major trailblazer in helping them do so. What do you envision the future of solo aging with that intersection of thinking about caregiving? That's also really important. We don't want to leave that behind. What do you envision that looking like in the future? And the future could be next week, who knows?
That's right.
And what kind of changes or improvements or shift would you like to see in how society supports solo agers?
Well, because of the prevalence of dementia in the world, that's where I would like to start. I have the privilege to have information and have visited countries where dementia is integrated into the lifestyle of everyone in the village. And so everyone is trained, people who are in public service, bus drivers, and people who work in the market. And there is a lot more training when it comes to dementia so that people are recognizing when someone might be in distress.
Mm,
For instance, you might be at a restaurant and forget to pay your bill and walk out. Well, they don't call the police. They just go, they know how to approach someone
eh,
and make an assumption that maybe forgetfulness was at play. There are slow lanes in stores in other countries where there's less hassle and impatient people go to a different lane. There's so much we could do around integrating society of people. And that includes all of us who become forgetful and confused,
mhm,
and that there's no reason that we cannot all help each other when it
right.
comes to dementia and dementia friendly cities.
Mm,
So that is what I envision, definitely more knowledge about dementia and how we can integrate all of these people, including ourselves. We get integrated into a system that understands what it means to be forgetful and have dementia, the symptoms of dementia.
learning from other countries and taking cues from places where things are working and valued and respected, maybe in a different way than our current society in the United States is really important. And in general, people make I like to use the word presumption instead of assumption, even if it's not grammatically correct, just sounds better about what someone living alone or living without reliable support might be, and not truly understanding what that is and what the different barriers or speed bumps might be to feeling actively engaged in community or navigating healthcare or making decisions. Your advocacy and the work of others is really important to help people see it from really universal, the notion that, well, that's not me. If you give a bunch of characteristics and I can't see myself in that framework, oh, I don't know a solo ager. We know that a quarter of the baby boomer generation didn't have children. We know that we have a caregiving shortage, both informally and professionally. I always joke that when you put that in a blender, the picture's not looking good. The smoothie's not delicious. I think that thinking about these things and taking cues from other places and being able to build those into infrastructures, even from the ground up, which is where the best work happens, the grassroots. We've talked about a lot of different fairly heavy subjects, really good subjects. I thought we'd just shake it up a little bit and get to know you a little better. And so I thought I would ask, if you had the opportunity to instantly master a skill or a talent, what would it be and why?
I wish I could play the violin. And the reason is, first of all, violin's small, so it'd fit in a
Mhm.
suitcase. But whenever I give a talk, I would love to end a talk with music, something beautiful. I would, of course, if this was like fantasy land, I could play on a Stradivarius and I would be phenomenal. And I would play a song that everyone would, it would calm all of us in the room, and we would just end on a happy note.
That's
I
fabulous.
wish I could play the violin.
That's fantastic. For so many reasons, personally, professionally, I think that's really lovely. It's likely that throughout your life, you've been offered a piece of advice or two. Is there something that's stuck with you over time that you really feel that sharing it as part of our conversation would be useful?
Oh, yeah. I think one of the best things I ever heard in my whole life when I was beginning to realize that I was in a connection situation with every single person that I met, whether I knew them or not. And the advice that was given to me was this: Joy, when you walk in the room, do you say, "Here I am," or do you walk in the room and say, "There you are"? And now I know I say there you. And that's what has kept me connected to total strangers. And I really feel that validating their presence in my vision, in my room, and at that moment has changed my entire life.
That's fantastic. That's something that anyone could take with them, and that certainly changes how I approach arriving in a room as well. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. No one has to be alone
Right.
unless they want to be. This is that piece of advice. There
Right.
you are. There you
Right.
are.
That's fantastic. We have certainly run the gamut in our conversation and been able to benefit from your insights and expertise. Before we wrap up, is there anything else? And again, I'll share the details of the books and the website, but is there anything else you'd like to add or any resources you'd recommend for our listeners or viewers, depending on how they're watching or listening to this?
I've been at the bedside of many people who are dying, and one of the things I wish they had was someone like you. Patient advocacy, I can't even talk about it enough. And you know that I am always, right now, I realize that people are in an education mode because I say a patient advocate and they say, "What's that?" Then I don't describe what you do, I describe the value, and that's when people say, "I had no idea." And so if there's one resource that I would love people to wake up to and not wait until a crisis knowing more about patient advocacy and all the amazing skills you bring to the table. especially at a time when people need your advice. And so that would be my resource.
Well, thank you for that addition. We love champions of healthcare advocacy. It's a newish profession, and the
Mhm.
opportunity to share the value and impact of working with someone and having that person on your team is always appreciated. Thank you for that and for joining the conversation today. And of course, for all the work and contributions you've done. It's truly been a pleasure. And I know you and I could have many hours of recorded conversation as well. So thank you. To find out more for our listeners, more about Joy and her work, the best place is to visit your website, right? Is to
It's
visit
yeah.
elderindustry.com. And that will be in the show notes. All you'll have to do is click a link. Hopefully, you're already familiar with it and the resources and upcoming talks and previous talks and embedded presentations and all of that are already available. And definitely do not hesitate to check out Joy's books. The Complete Elder Care Planner is in its fourth edition. It arrived last October and to great acclaim and is really doing very well. And I know Joy has been very busy having conversations relating to its arrival. And of course, Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? And as I said, your website and other resources. Your books have fabulous worksheets and ideas and prompts and low cost, no cost, and everywhere else resources. I really encourage people to explore those. I think they may find themselves in education mode and then they'll find themselves in go to mode. Oh, I know exactly where my first stop should be in looking for that kind of information. You're also present on social media. So if people are social media folks, they're welcome to connect with you, I presume.
LinkedIn is
And
great and Facebook. Yep.
okay, so we'll make sure to list those as well. So thank you to our listeners or viewers for tuning in to the Navigating Solo podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions or suggestions for topics that you would like to see us explore or guests you would like to see us host, you can send us an email at podcast@navigatingsolo.com, also available in the show notes. Until next time, I encourage you to stay empowered and connected. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and this is the Navigating Solo podcast.